My name is Jenna Ray Hollowell. I'm 38, and I've made it through boardrooms tougher than most boot camps. But somehow, Sunday dinner at my mother's house still manages to feel like a performance review I didn't ask for. The roast is always overdone. The seating chart never changes, and Chad, brother-in-law, never misses a chance to remind everyone that I'm not really in tech. Just a wannabe consultant with color-coded folders. Have you ever felt like the most invisible person in a room full of people who watched you grow up? If so, hit that like button or drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Because what happened next? Let's just say it was the night I stopped swallowing the disrespect. But to explain why that moment hit so hard, let me take you back to the first glass of wine and the first eye roll. The wine was already open when I walked in. Merlot. Predictable. Chad's pick, of course. He was swirling his glass like he invented grapes, perched at the head of the table like a smug centerpiece. Mallory was laughing too hard at something he'd said before I even set my salad on the counter. And Mom, she gave me that polite half-hug she saves for social acquaintances and disappointing daughters. "Jenna," she said, too brightly. "You made it." I said I'd be here, I smiled, slipping off my coat. The table was already mostly set Chad's doing, no doubt. He likes his rituals. He always sits at the head. Mallory to his right, Mom to his left. And me? Tucked in at the far end by the serving cart. No one ever says it, but it's my assigned seat, not quite exile, just out of the way. I placed the salad down and sat quietly, letting the steam from the lemon chicken curl around me like polite small talk. Mallory was going on about her homeschooling blog's latest brand deal, complete with phrases like audience synergy and sponsored literacy moments. Mom nodded along proudly. Then Chad cleared his throat. The universal signal that attention should be shifted to him. So, he said, leaning back like a TED Talk was about to start. Braintree Solutions just featured our platform in their top 10 AI disruptors in the Southeast. They said we're shaking up logistics from the root. Mallory gasped like he'd just cured cancer. Mom reached over to touch his wrist with that "you've always been special" look. I sipped my water and waited the obligatory 5 seconds. "That's great," I said, evenly. "Actually, we're looking into a few AI integrations for mid-tier freight visual recognition overlays for fleet ops. Early phase, but promising." Chad turned toward me slowly, as if remembering I'd spoken. His grin spread like a bad idea. "You're in tech?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "What is that now? Social media hashtag optimization? Pinterest strategy?" The chuckle came before I could respond. Mallory's, tight and rehearsed. Mom's fork paused midair but didn't intervene. I froze, just for a second. Long enough to hear my own pulse. Then I smiled. "Something like that," I said. Chad poured more wine with the flourish of a man whose ego needed hydration. "You should see our new backend overhaul. It's like playing 3D chess with real-time data ingestion. Wild stuff." I nodded politely. Inside, something hollowed out and cooled over. 6 acquisitions. 3 under stealth NDA. 2 with billion-dollar pivots. And I'm the punchline with Pinterest. After dinner, while Mallory cleared plates with her signature sigh, Chad leaned in. "You should come by tomorrow," he said. "Downtown showcase up and coming startups. Might be fun for you to see what real tech looks like." He tilted my head. "What time?" "I'll put you on the list," he smirked, already walking away. I didn't answer. Instead, I looked around the table. My seat. The half-empty salad bowl. The unspoken hierarchy still perfectly intact. Then my eyes landed on Grandma Marlene, seated silently by the window. She hadn't said a word all night. But her eyes met mine and didn't look away. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She just saw me. And honestly, that was more than I'd gotten from anyone else in that room. I slipped my phone from my pocket under the table, opened notes, and typed one line. "Keep receipts. Even when they think you're just background noise." The next morning, I arrived 20 minutes early, just like I always do. Downtown Huntsville was buzzing with that mix of nervous caffeine and startup ambition, sharp blazers over jeans, too many lanyards, and the hum of small talk trying to sound important. I stepped into the tech hub lobby, heels soft on the polished tile, and made my way to the check-in table. The woman behind the laptop looked up, squinted at her screen, then smiled politely. "Jenna Hollowell?" "Yes," I said. She clicked a few times. "You're listed under event staff." She reached under the table and handed me a plain white badge. No company logo. Just a printed name and support, Chad Whitmore guest list underneath. E blinked. "I think there's been a mistake," I said. "That's what it says here." Her smile didn't falter. Across the lobby, Chad was already holding court. He saw me, smiled that self-satisfied smirk and raised his cup in a fake little cheers gesture. His badge? Polished. Laminated. Byteframe AI. CEO. I clipped mine on and walked in anyway. Because some things aren't worth arguing. Some things, you just document. Inside the main hall, digital screens rotated through highlight reels, photos of founders, demos, celebratory moments with neon confetti and stock music triumph. I stood near the back, clutching a small paper cup of weak coffee, letting the noise swirl around me like television static. Then I saw it. The slideshow paused on a still image I knew immediately. There we were, me, Chad, and 3 engineers standing behind a cluttered demo table during a product launch last year. Monitors glowing, post-it notes everywhere, and that ugly orange poster I insisted we replace but Chad loved. But my name wasn't on it. The caption read, "Launch led by Chad Whitmore and team." And the part of the photo where my badge had been? Cropped out. Just enough. Just so. I didn't move. Didn't frown. Didn't blink. I just stared at it as it looped, again and again. It wasn't just omission, it was design. And I realized this wasn't the first time. At my last firm, a guy named Jared used one of my pitches word for word in a quarterly meeting. He called it team synergy, and I smiled through it. Another time, someone forgot to include my name on a press release even though I'd written the damn thing. I'd always convinced myself it wasn't intentional. That maybe they forgot. Maybe I was being sensitive. But this was strategy. I moved through the crowd and ducked into the side hallway where the main stage was set up. Chad was already mic'd up, pacing like he was about to headline Coachella. He caught sight of me standing there, near the doorway. "You made it," he said, like I was an intern. "Enlighten me," I replied, flat. He grinned and turned back toward the stage. I slipped into a seat in the back row as the room filled. Young founders in hoodies, VCs with resting suspicion face, reporters with tablets open. Chad launched into his talk with full confidence, voice amplified, posture rehearsed. And then slide 3. It was my diagram. The circular strategy map I built in late September, 6 core pillars, outlined in blue, surrounded by application zones in teal. I designed it for an internal pitch. I knew the exact placement of every font. Even the misspelled acceleration in the lower corner that I forgot to fix. Chad clicked through as if it were his creation. The room nodded along. I sat with my arms crossed, heart slow and heavy. This wasn't the first time I'd been told I didn't belong in a space I helped build. But maybe it would be the last time I let it slide. After the talk, he walked past me in the hallway. "Hope you enjoyed the show," he said. I smiled. It was enlightening. Section. That night, back in my apartment, I poured a glass of water and opened my laptop. I pulled up my project folder, clicked open an archive I hadn't touched in months, and created a new subfolder. Chad. Attribution Watch. I uploaded the slideshow screenshots. Then I opened a photo from last year's Demoth original one, the one before the crop. There I was, badge visible, hands mid-gesture, eyes locked on the investor we were trying to impress. I stared at my own face for a moment. Then I whispered under my breath, "You're not invisible, they just hope you'll stay quiet." And I added the photo to the folder too. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just backed everything up twice and closed the lid. Because some people build things. And some people steal the credit until the room forgets who did the real work. But not this time. This time, I was keeping receipts. And that folder? It wasn't revenge. It was memory. The kind you protect. Just in case you ever need to remind the world. Or yourself. That you were there. Even when they tried to crop you out. The podcast went live just after 8 a.m. I wasn't even looking for it. It showed up in the family group chat. Donna had posted the link like it was a baby announcement. "Look at our chat go," she wrote. Such vision. A gif of fireworks followed. Then clapping hands. Then Mallory chimed in with a thumbs up and, "You married a genius." I tapped the link. Chad's voice came through my phone like static wrapped in self-congratulation. He talked about strategy, scaling, vision-led innovation. Every phrase buzzed in my ears because I'd written them all on a whiteboard, in a deck, in a brainstorming doc he swore was just internal alignment. And now he was saying it like he'd made it up over lunch. So I typed a reply. Just one line. Calm. Factual, not even sharp. Just a note: this AI framework came from a non-compete agreement I wrote for GenLink back in 2021, not Byteframe. 10 seconds later, it was gone. Not edited. Not argued with. Deleted. I stared at the thread for a second, wondering if I'd misread something. Then came the real hit. "You were removed from this chat by admin." Just like that. Like a chair pulled out from under you while you're still mid-sentence. Admin was Donna. My mother. I didn't gasp. Didn't drop my phone. My stomach didn't drop either. It stilled. The kind of still that happens when something inside you realizes it's not a surprise, it's just confirmation. I sat there on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, blinking at the screen like it might explain itself. Then it buzzed again. New text from Donna. I tapped it open. She always finds a way to insert herself. That's why she never got far. My heart didn't break. Not exactly. But I did feel something cold and tight settle in my chest. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and didn't even realize it. I stared at her message, my thumb hovering above the screen. Then I typed. "You sent this to me." 3 dots appeared, paused, disappeared. I waited. 5 minutes. Then 10. Nothing. Eventually, I took a screenshot. Not because I wanted revenge. Because memory has a way of rewriting itself when everyone else acts like it never happened. I opened my laptop and dragged the file into the archive. New folder. Family. Redacted. Subfolder. Thread removed. I labeled it internal. Maternal. A quiet ping sounded from my inbox. I didn't even check who it was. Just turned the screen off and sat in the silence. That night, I brought my laptop to the couch and curled up with a blanket that still smelled like lavender detergent. I opened my notes app and scrolled through old quotes I'd saved. One jumped out at me. "Never argue with people committed to misunderstanding you." I stared at that line for a while. Then I opened a new note. Typed. "When they pretend you're not there long enough, you start to wonder if you ever were." Heath came in from the kitchen, setting a mug of tea on the side table beside me. He didn't ask what happened, he never pushes. But his hand grazed my shoulder gently as he sat down. We didn't speak. Just watched the soft glow of the television screen flicker against the far wall. Some part of me wanted to cry, maybe scream, maybe demand something I knew I wouldn't get. Instead, I reached for my phone again. Opened photos. Scrolled to last Thanksgiving. There it was, our family photo. Chad in the center, holding up his wine glass. Mallory beside him, grinning with her whole face. Donna's hand on his shoulder like she was proud of the son she never had. And me? In the corner. Half turned. Laughing at something no one remembered. Not tagged, not mentioned, just background. I saved it anyway. Dragged it to the same folder. Not out of bitterness, just so I wouldn't forget. Because the worst part of being erased isn't the silence. It's starting to believe the silence means you were never really there. And tonight? I wasn't going to let myself believe that. Monday mornings usually followed a rhythm. Coffee in hand, inbox open before 8, and a stack of flagged briefs waiting in my shared drive. Most of them were forgettable early-stage platforms with inflated buzzwords and no infrastructure. But the fourth file down made me pause. I blinked once. Then again. Byteframe AI Solutions. My thumb hovered over the trackpad. It had to be a coincidence, right? Some knockoff using the same name? I clicked. Nope. CEO, Chad Whitmore. I leaned back slowly, like my body was trying to make space for the surreal. Of all the startups in the pipeline this quarter, his landed on my desk. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then opened the deck. First slide, inflated numbers. Second slide, projections that felt like wishes. Third slide, early demo footage. I remembered that demo. Because I'd built it. The pitch read like someone repackaging fireworks from a backyard show and calling it NASA. Still, I took a breath, leaned in, and did what I do. I read every word like a stranger. New emotion. New history. Just analysis. Revenue was shaky. Churn rate quietly buried in fine print. Their runway was thinner than their logo font. But the kicker came in my inbox 20 minutes later. Subject: urgent, extend burn rate timeline. At first, I assumed it wasn't for me. Probably another Jen in compliance or finance. But the address was clear. It had landed in my inbox, probably autofilled by someone in a hurry. 3 slides were attached. Internal use only. The first one made my jaw tighten. Personnel cuts. Vendor the firmans. The third slide held the worst line of all. Maintain founder image for external optics. We pitch confidence, not risk. I read it again. Then a third time, slower. He wasn't just stretching the truth, he was airbrushing it and calling it authenticity. I hit print. Not because I was panicking. Because I needed something physical. Something real. The paper was warm in my hands when I slid it into a folder and walked it to my drawer. The top drawer. The one with the lock I only used twice a year. I dropped the folder in and turned the key. That was the first moment I realized I held the match. I didn't have to strike it. Not yet. But I wasn't going to pretend I didn't see the gasoline. That afternoon, my assistant popped her head in. "Hey," she said, casual. "Didn't know you were connected to Byteframe. They're listed in your queue." I kept my tone even. "Yeah, we've crossed paths." She nodded. "You want me to flag it for external conflict?" I shook my head. "Not yet, I'm just observing." She left, and I stared at the screen again. Every part of me wanted to throw it back in the system and let someone else deal with it. But another part, the one that had sat through dinners being invisible, through pitches that were mine but quoted in someone else's voice. That part wanted to see it through. Not to burn it down. But to finally, quietly, hold the truth where no one could erase it. I clicked open a new document and typed. Subject: request for advisory. Only role on Byteframe file. Potential relational proximity. Will recuse from formal negotiation. I paused before hitting send. Then added one more line. Will remain technical reviewer for internal accuracy. I hit send. No fanfare. No alarm bells. Just strategy. With teeth. That night, I poured a glass of why not to celebrate. To stay awake. Because I wasn't tired. I was wide awake for the first time in months. Heath sat on the couch, flipping through a magazine. He looked up as I stepped into the living room. "What's the play?" he asked. I sat beside him and handed him my glass. Observe, recommend, recuse. He raised an eyebrow. But never pretend I didn't see the fire coming. He clinked his glass to mine. To vision. I smiled. To strategy. Because Chad still thought this was a game of optics. Like if you smiled wide enough, said, scaling enough times, and dropped AI acronyms into every sentence, the money would follow. But here's what he didn't know. We don't fund charisma. We fund viability. And Byteframe was running out of both. The presentation room smelled like lemon polish and overconfidence. Rows of chairs lined up with perfect symmetry, name tags printed in bold font, a sleek monitor flickering with the Biteframe logo in that too modern, too thin typeface Chad thought made them look futuristic. I took a seat in the back. No title card, no fanfare. Just a legal pad on my lap and a pen I didn't need to use, because this wasn't about notes. This was about watching, documenting, remembering. Chad stood near the front, adjusting his collar, shaking hands too long with VCs he thought were impressed. They weren't. Not really. But they smiled like they were waiting for the free drinks. He caught my eye as he walked toward the mic. "Glad you could make it," he said. The kind of glad that sounded more like stay in your corner. I nodded, said nothing. And then the lights dimmed. The first two slides were boilerplate company name, problem solution, market potential. Nothing surprising. But slide 3 stopped my breath. It was mine. The strategy wheel I drafted on a whiteboard one October night after 12 hours of logistics data. 6 zones of integration. Teal and slate blue. Same language, same structure. Even the mistake in quadrant 4 acceleration instead of acceleration. I'd left it there by accident. He hadn't even caught it. And now, it was projected on a 10-foot screen in front of investors who thought they were seeing something original. Chad paced like he was delivering genius, pointing at the pillars like they were the product of late-night brainstorming in a glass office. I felt a wave rise in my chest ridge, grief, disbelief. But I stayed still. Because stillness is sometimes the sharpest weapon. My phone buzzed once in my lap. Evelyn Tran. He just lied on the record. "You okay?" I stared at the screen. She knew. She saw it. My fingers moved on instinct. I pulled out my phone camera, angled it just enough to capture the slide. Then the timestamp. Slide 4. Slide 5. More of my phrasing. Multi-tier distribution velocity. Supply. Aligned performance metrics. My words. His voice. I didn't clench my jaw. I didn't exhale hard. I just started counting slides. 9, 10, 12. All dressed up like invention. All papered over with borrowed brilliance. After the applause, Chad shook hands again. Backslaps. Laughter. He passed by me with that smug smile he wore like cologne. "Think they bought it?" he whispered. I met his eyes. "You tell me." I could see the flicker of doubt just for a second. Then he smirked and walked off, his shoulders pulled back like he'd won something. I opened my laptop that night, created a new folder. Chad. Presentation evidence. Subfolder. Investor Pitch 2024. I added the screenshots, then opened a note and logged the entire slide order, exact timestamps, and audience reactions. Not because I needed a case. Because I needed clarity. Clarity that this wasn't personal misunderstanding. This was theft. And not the kind you yell about. The kind you prove in silence. Later that evening, I got another message from Evelyn. "When you're ready, we move." Anobly. I stared at those 5 words for a long time. Part warning, part promise. I hadn't replied yet. Because the truth was, I didn't know what I was ready for. I didn't want revenge. But I was tired of sitting through stolen applause. I reached for the flash drive in my desk drawer, the one I hadn't touched in months. It held an original version of the strategy wheel. Dated, labeled, raw. I plugged it in and watched the file open. My handwriting, my notes, my flow. It was all there. Proof doesn't need to shout. It just needs to exist in a place no one can erase it. And tonight, that was enough. For now. But deep down, I knew what was coming. Because sometimes the only way to remind people you built something is to let them hang themselves with the blueprint. Sunday dinner smelled like overcooked green beans and tension. Same roast. Same plates. Same arrangement. Chad at the head of the table like he earned it. Mallory to his right, Donna to his left. Me? Bottom end, like always, close enough to serve, far enough to ignore. No one said a word about the pitch. Not the strategy. Not the fact that I was in the room at all. They didn't need to. Silence had become its own kind of gaslight. Chad raised his glass after the salad was passed. To momentum, he said. We're in talks with 3 new investors. Feedback was glowing. Mallory grinned. I told you they'd eat it up. That slide with the wheel thing? Genius. I cut into my roast. Carefully. I didn't look up. Donna smiled at him like he hung the moon. You've always had that leadership gene. My fork paused midair. And then Grandma Marlene cleared her throat. Not loud, not dramatic. Just enough. That's strange, she said quietly, buttering a roll like she was commenting on the weather. Jenna told me she triggered that review at her firm weeks ago. The room went still. Mallory blinked, confused. Donna furrowed her brow like she'd misheard. And Chad? His smile faltered. Just slightly. I mean, he started. Sure, Jenna works with a lot of companies. But this one's mine. He chuckled, too fast, too thin. Grandma didn't flinch. Didn't smile. She said it landed on her desk, she said calmly. Said she recognized the phrasing. And the colors. She broke her roll in half, added a small dollop of peach jam, and took a bite. Mallory laughed nervously. Well, I mean, Jenna always has strong opinions about slide decks. I took a sip of my water. Still didn't speak. Because there was nothing left to explain. And, maybe for the first time, I didn't need to be believed to be right. My phone buzzed in my lap. A quiet, persistent vibration. I slid it out, thumbed the screen. Forbes alert. How a quiet strategist is redefining AI investment models in the Southeast. My name was in the headline. A short pause, then a ping text from Evelyn. It's up, quiet no more. I looked around the table. Donna still stared at her plate. Mallory's fork hovered midair. Chad kept chewing, like maybe if he didn't acknowledge it, it would go away. And Grandma? She just kept eating. Like she'd always known this was coming. Like she'd been waiting. I put my phone face down beside my plate. No need to read the rest. No need to wave it in anyone's face. Let them look it up later. Let them see it when it scrolls past their feeds and stings. Chad stood abruptly and grabbed the wine bottle. Refill, anyone? His voice cracked just slightly on anyone. Donna nodded like she hadn't heard anything out of place. Mallory adjusted her napkin and smiled too wide. But no one looked at me. And that was fine. Because for once, I wasn't asking them to. I glanced toward Grandma. She met my eyes and gave the faintest tilt of her head. Not a nod, just acknowledgement. That was all I needed. Dinner resumed. Forks scraped plates. Glasses clinked. Laughter returned, but softer this time. Less sure. I sat through it. Calm. Not smug. Not satisfied. Just steady. Later, as I walked to the front door, Grandma caught up to me in the hallway. She slipped something into my hand, a folded photo from last Thanksgiving. The same one where I'd been cropped out online. But in this one, there I was. Full frame, laughing, mid-sentence. I never deleted the real one, she whispered. I swallowed. Thank you, I said. She gave my arm a light squeeze. Then she walked back to the table like nothing had happened. I stepped outside into the cool air, phone buzzing again in my pocket with alerts I didn't need to read. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel erased. I felt documented. I woke up to 47 text messages. The first one was from a former coworker I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. The second was from a reporter I didn't recognize. The third was a link. Just one sentence beneath it. Did you know this was coming? I sat up slowly. Opened the link. A podcast player loaded Startup Exit Wounds, bonus episode. I stared at the title. He said the quiet part out loud, behind Byteframe's real AI strategy. For a moment, I just sat there, frozen. Then I hit play. Chad's voice came through the speakers, unfiltered, a little too loud. No intro music. No polish. Just raw audio, him talking off mic to someone else in the room. Probably the podcast host. Maybe a producer. Look, man, the strategy wasn't even mine. I needed a deck, and Jenna had the cleanest structure. I tweaked the labels. It's not like she was using it. Silence. Then more. I mean, she builds the bones, but I sell the face. That's the game, right? My breath caught. He laughed. Loud. Careless. She's smart, sure. But she doesn't know how to work a room. You gotta look like a leader to get funded. I paused the player. The apartment was too quiet, like the walls were listening. My laptop was still open from the night before. I scanned through recent downloads, nothing. Then I remembered. An old email. Forwarded from Grandma. Weeks ago. Subject line, thought you'd want a copy. I hadn't opened it at the time. Too tired. Too buried in my own silence. I found it. Opened it. It was a forwarded audio file. No explanation. No body text. Just the file and a single sentence. He said it. I heard it. Now it's yours. I closed my eyes for a second. Then hit play again. This time, I let it run. I listened as Chad admitted clearly, proudly, that he had used my work, repackaged it, and walked into investor meetings like he'd built it from scratch. The host pushed back at one point. So, you took her IP and pitched it as yours? Chad chuckled. Look, nobody cares where the stuff comes from. They care who presents it with confidence. I felt something drop in my chest. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. Cold and absolute. The truth wasn't just out there. It was documented. On record. On tape. In a feed that would be streamed, clipped, reposted, dissected. And none of it had come from me. I didn't leak it. Didn't whisper to a friend. Didn't push the button. I just existed long enough for the lie to crumble under its own weight. My phone buzzed again. Evelyn. We didn't have to lift a finger. I put my phone down on the table. Walked to the kitchen. Boiled water. Waited for it to hiss and steam. Poured it into a chipped mug with a faded NASA logo. The one Grandma gave me after I landed my first job in tech. I sat at the kitchen table and let the tea steep. My phone buzzed again this time. It was Mallory. Just a single message. I had no idea. Then Donna. You could have handled this privately. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. Because I had nothing left to prove. This wasn't mine to clean up. It never was. A part of me wanted to cry. Not from sadness. From the release. From the weight of years carrying around the burden of being doubted, cropped out, second-guessed. It had finally been said. In his own voice. On record. No room left for reinterpretation. Later that afternoon, I took a walk around the block. Clear sky, warm breeze. I passed 3 people with earbuds in. Any one of them could have been listening to that episode. Or not. It didn't matter. Because the silence I'd carried for so long was finally louder than his noise. By Tuesday, the texts had slowed down. No more reporters. No more forwarded links. Just the people who suddenly remembered I existed when silence was no longer an option. Mallory was the first to reach out again. This time with more than one line. I've been thinking. Maybe we should all just hit reset. Things got messy, but I don't think anyone meant harm. I read the message 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it. But because I did. Reset is what people ask for when they don't want to deal with what actually happened. Reset means let's skip over the part where we sit in the discomfort. Let's erase the fallout. Let's skip the part where we say the words "I failed you." An hour later, Donna chimed in. I know how things look online, but we're still family. Don't let outsiders decide what family means. Outsiders. She meant Evelyn. Maybe Grandma. Maybe the podcast host, or Forbes, or anyone who dared to believe me out loud. I didn't respond. And then, at 3:12 p.m., Chad sent an email. Subject line, no hard feelings. 3 sentences. Appreciate you not going nuclear. I've got enough to deal with. Hope we can put this behind us. See. No apology. Just gratitude for my silence. I stared at it for a long time. Then closed the tab without responding. Later that evening, I pulled out an old keepsake box from the top shelf of my hall closet. The one I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a calendar from high school, one of those DIY things we used to make in tech class. Photos printed on glossy cardstock. Labeled with birthdays, family vacations, even a few notes from Grandma in the margins. I flipped to October. There was a photo of Mallory's science fair project. Glitter-covered trifold. Her name in big bubble letters. Everyone smiling around it. Next month, Chad at football banquet, arm around my mom, wearing a varsity jacket that somehow made him look more permanent than he really was. There were no pictures of my debate trophies. No screenshots of my scholarship letter. Not even a caption about the day I left for Georgia Tech. It wasn't intentional. But it was real. The invisibility hadn't started with a podcast. It started in moments like these, quiet deletions no one noticed until they added up. I closed the calendar and slipped it back inside the box. Not because it hurt, but because I didn't need it to validate anything anymore. Evelyn called around 7. I picked up on the second ring. "You okay?" she asked, no preamble. I paused. "Yeah, I think I actually am." "That's dangerous," she said, half joking. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't need filling. "He emailed me," I said finally. "I'm sure," she replied. And Mallory texted. Donna too. They're not ready to be wrong. They're just ready to move on. That landed harder than I expected. Because part of me still wanted them to say it. To name it. To call it what it was. Not to punish them. But to prove I wasn't crazy all these years. Still, I knew what Evelyn meant. You don't go back to pretending just because the table's been reset. Especially when you finally learned how to eat somewhere else. Heath came in from the other room, carrying takeout and 2 bottled teas. Thai food. My favorite. He set it down and gave me a look. A quiet, "You good?" Without saying the words. I nodded. We sat together on the couch, eating noodles in comfortable silence. Halfway through, he reached over and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "You don't owe them softness just because they finally see the outline of who you are," he said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't poetry. It was just true. I looked down at my phone again. Mallory's message still open. I typed 4 words. "I'm not coming back." Then deleted them. Not because I changed my mind, but because I didn't need to say it out loud. Some boundaries don't have to be spoken. They just have to be kept. The email came on a Wednesday morning, sandwiched between a payroll update and a vendor invoice. Subject line, TechVision 2025, Keynote Invitation. I opened it slowly, not because I didn't know what it was, but because some part of me needed to reread it twice to believe it was real. They were asking Menno to advise, not to ghostwrite, not to sit on a back row panel with a title that sounded more polite than meaningful. They were asking me to lead, to open the main stage, to speak in my own voice. My first thought wasn't excitement. It was memory. Last year, same event, same organization, I'd submitted the exact same strategic deck. Slide for slide, model for model, case study, impact projection, closing framework. The reply back then? Too complex for our core audience. Better suited as an internal session. I didn't even save the email. But I remember every word of that line. Now here they were. Same slides. Some strategy. But this time, my name was showing up first. Not footnoted. Not buried under someone else's charm. First. I sat with it for a long minute. Then opened my original file. The one I hadn't touched since October. It still had the working title at the top. Silent Structures, Redesigning AI for the Undervalued. No polish, no branding, just the truth. I stared at the font for a while. Then pressed Save As and changed the name to Voice First. When? Because this time, that's what it would be. I accepted the invite. They sent over the press packet, the speaking schedule, the pass list. As I scrolled through, a name caught my eye. Chad's old company was listed as one of last year's panel submissions. I clicked the archived application. Same buzzwords, same claims, but new acceptance stamp. A note at the bottom read, redundant with existing submissions. Weak strategic outline. I didn't feel smug. I didn't even feel vindicated. I just felt still. Because maybe this was never about taking something back. Maybe it was about standing where I always should have been and doing the work, regardless of who noticed. The conference was 3 weeks out. I flew in the night before, kept my phone on airplane mode, and checked into a quiet hotel just off the venue strip. Floor 7. Room 719. View of a loading dock and a glimpse of the skyline if you leaned far enough. It was perfect. The morning of, I got dressed early. Black blazer. Simple blouse. No jewelry. Not because I was trying to impress anyone. Because I didn't need to armor up anymore. I just needed to show up. The keynote pass was clipped to a lanyard that read, Strategic Catalyst, Opening Presenter. I stared at the badge for a beat too long in the mirror. Then tucked it under my jacket and headed out. Backstage was crowded. Event staff with headsets, speakers pacing with note cards. That low, anxious energy of people trying to look calm while every nerve lit up. I stood near the curtains, flipping through my deck one last time. A young woman, maybe early 20s, nervous in a fresh blazer stood beside me, glancing at my slides. Hey, she said, gesturing to my screen. That model. Someone pitched something like that last year. Didn't land though. I smiled. Yeah, I said quietly. I remember. She looked confused for a second. Then curious. You're up first, right? She asked. I nodded. Yep. Cool, she said, tucking her hair behind her ear. It's nice to see someone leading with that kind of structure. Most talks are all buzzwords. She didn't say it to flatter me. She said it because it was rare. Because it mattered. Because people like us don't always get to go first. My name was called. Lights adjusted. The crowd murmured. I stepped forward, heels clicking softly on the polished floor. And right before the curtain opened, I slipped the lanyard from under my blazer, letting the badge fall where they could see it. Because this time, I wasn't hiding. I was keynoting. And the invite? Was nicht late. It just came when the world was finally ready to listen. The lights weren't harsh. They were warm. Steady. The kind that don't blind you, just remind you that people are watching. I stepped up to the podium, my notes folded neatly in my hand. I didn't look at them. The stage manager whispered, "Mic's hot," then backed away. The room was quiet. Not silent in that anxious, too formal way. Quiet like breath held. Like curiosity waiting for direction. I took mine. Slowly. "Good morning," I said. Simple. Steady. My name is Jenna Ray Hollowell, and for most of my career, I was the person just outside the frame. A few heads lifted. One man lowered his phone. A woman near the front leaned in slightly, like her ears had been waiting for that exact tone. I was in the room. I was on the email. I was caught, sometimes even thanked. I paused. Not for effect, just to breathe. But the strategy, the shape, the voice, it was often delivered by someone else. A soft murmur moved through the rows. Nothing loud. Just acknowledgement. I could have stopped there. Let it hang. Let them connect the dots. But I didn't come to unearth bitterness. I came to name what no one wants to say. I don't tell you this to make you uncomfortable, I said. I tell you this so you know that if you've ever felt invisible while building something real, you're not imagining it. A pause. A held breath. And you're not alone. In the third row, a woman with short braids and a conference lanyard gripped her pen a little tighter. I saw her eyes go glassy, just for a second. Then she blinked. And nodded. I continued. When I started building frameworks for AI optimization models, I was told to soften the language. To use more color. to take out overwhelming detail. A few chuckles. And when I took the feedback, I was told the models lacked substance. Now the chuckles turned knowing. I learned, eventually, that what made me different wasn't a flaw in translation. It was a misalignment in comfort. I let that settle. See, the rooms weren't built to hear voices like mine. They were built to echo what already felt familiar. A quiet shifting of weight in the crowd. But here's what I've learned. You don't need permission to take up space in a room you helped construct. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gesture wildly. I just spoke like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to offer. The woman with the braids wiped the corner of her eye. Behind her, someone nodded hard enough for their glasses to shift. I'm not here because someone decided I earned it this time. I'm here because the work stood when the noise faded. Soft applause. Not forced, not on cue, just real. I ended the talk not with a quote or a pitch, but with a single line. The next generation of strategy won't come from the loudest rooms. It'll come from the ones where the overlooked finally speak. The applause built this time louder, fuller. By the time I stepped off stage, the standing ovation had already begun. I didn't wait for it to finish. Didn't linger in the spotlight. I walked backstage and let the curtain fall behind me. Evelyn was there, arms crossed, eyes glistening. She didn't say a word. Just reached out and gave my hand a single, strong squeeze. Heath appeared a second later, holding a paper cup of coffee and a grin that said more than anything. I took the cup and finally exhaled. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't pretending. I was whole. And heard. And exactly where I was meant to be. The conference ended like most hotel lobbies, full of half-packed bags, business cards exchanged too late, and people promising to circle back over lukewarm coffee. But this time, I wasn't just shaking hands. I was being invited in. Or, more accurately, being asked to build something new. A woman named Patrice approached me right after the keynote, eyes still wet but voice clear. "We've been trying to start a leadership accelerator," she said. "Something different. Not just training, actual structure. Frameworks. Equity. And after hearing you..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I knew the feeling behind her pause. The kind that doesn't come from excitement. It comes from recognition. "I want you to lead it," she said. "Build it however you see fit." I nodded slowly, letting it settle. And for once, I didn't have to ask what the catch was. Because there wasn't one. They weren't asking me to reshape myself to fit their system. They were offering to shape a system around what I'd already proven true. I flew home the next morning with my headphones on, staring out the window as the clouds stretched like paper across the sky. When I landed, there were the usual texts, Evelyn with a proud "We'll talk soon," Heath asking what kind of pizza I wanted for dinner. And then, a voicemail from Grandma. Her voice was slower than usual, but steady. "Jenna girl," she said. "I listened to that speech twice. I may not understand all those tech terms, but I know what it means when someone finds their footing. You built your own floor, baby. And they didn't see it because they never thought to look down. Or up." She paused. "I'm proud of you. And I'm glad you didn't wait for permission. You'd still be waiting." I saved that voicemail in 3 places. Back home, I opened a fresh notepad. Not a doc. Not a spreadsheet. A real, spiral-bound notebook with pages that smelled faintly of cardboard and ink. I titled the first page, "The Structure They Never Taught Us." Below it, I started outlining the modules. Not just about pitch decks or fundraising, but about visibility. About naming your own work before someone else does. About holding your line when the room starts clapping for someone else using your words. I wrote late into the night, stopping only when Heath brought me tea and rested a hand on my back. "This feels different," he said softly. "It is," I replied. "Is it for them?" I shook my head. Number. It's not to get back at anyone. It's to build something I wish I'd had when they didn't think I needed it. At the bottom of the page, I drew a box. Inside it, I wrote the word launch. Not for tomorrow. Not for next quarter. But because someday, someone like me, quiet, brilliant, doubted, would need to walk into a room and know that it was already built with her in mind. I wasn't proving anything anymore. I was planting something. And this time, no one gets to take the credit. No one gets to erase the seed. The first day of the accelerator felt quiet. Not anticlimactic. Not underwhelming. Just quiet in the way real things often are: steady, deliberate, unspectacular to the untrained eye. We didn't have neon lights or branded notebooks or a 10-camera live stream. We had 18 women. Laptops open. Minds sharp. Some with decades of brilliance behind them. Others just learning how to name what they already know. And they were listening. Not because I raised my voice, but because I no longer needed to shrink it. The launch went smoother than I expected. Questions were smart. Feedback was direct. The conversations cut through fluff and got right to the marrow. After the last breakout session, I walked into the hallway where sunlight pooled on the tile like warm honey. Patrice stood leaning against the wall, sipping coffee with a look that said this mattered. "Full room," she said. I nodded. "And waitlisted for next quarter." I smiled. "Not wide. Just enough." Back in my office later that afternoon, I sat at the small desk where I'd written the original outline. The same notepad sat in front of me, pages now curled at the corners from use. A package was waiting in the mail tray. No label. Just a craft envelope and my name written in soft script. Inside, a framed photograph. The original Thanksgiving picture. But this time, it wasn't cropped. I was there, centered. Laughing. Not backgrounded, not edited out, just there. A post-it was stuck to the corner. Truth doesn't need to yell. It just needs to stay standing. Grandma. I ran my thumb over the edge of the frame, then set it down on the windowsill, where it caught the light just right. My phone buzzed. A message from Mallory. "Heard about the launch. People keep talking about it. Real proud of you. No punctuation. But also no deflection. Just acknowledgement. Late, maybe. But not hollow." I typed back. "Thanks." Then paused. Deleted it. Instead, I set the phone down and leaned back. Because I didn't need to explain this version of me anymore. She existed. She built. She stood. And the ripple of that would reach people who'd never even heard my name. I looked down at the roster for next quarter. One name caught my eye: first-time founder. Mid-40s. Alabama native. Focused on ethical AI models for rural development. In her intro email, she wrote, "I almost didn't apply. I thought maybe this wasn't for people like me. But then I watched your keynote." I smiled again. This time wider. Because legacy isn't made in headlines or applause. It's made in what gets passed down quietly. What gets planted. What outlives the noise. And this would echo.